crowd behind me is saying shut down Canada, and I fully agree with them.
I'm trying to get to Ottawa to see my nephew who's just diagnosed with a terminal illness. So yeah, it's really frustrating.
Hitting the streets, halting rail traffic, pipeline protesters are ramping up their disruptions, impacting the lives of thousands in the process. This is a shot of the protest site tonight. Just over an hour ago, the OPP delivered a message to the demonstrators. They told them the situation there was now dire and that police will enforce a court injunction prohibiting the blockade. Since last Thursday, demonstrators have been camped out near rail tracks east of the city. The protest in solidarity with opponents of a natural gas pipeline in northwestern British Columbia. Despite that injunction, they are still there tonight and the disruptions continue. The railway blockade is happening near Belleville, adjacent to the Tyonega Mohawk territory. Via Rail says it's forced them to cancel 157 train trips on their Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal corridor, impacting nearly 25,000 passengers. Today, those protests spread, with demonstrators shutting down Yonge and Eglinton this afternoon. Farah Morelli joins us now from Front and Bathurst over the rail lines. And Farah, it's been another day of canceled Via Rail trains. We can see them lined up behind you there. But we're hearing police might soon be moving in to end that protest near Belleville.
That's right, Dwight. As you mentioned, just after 4 o'clock, the OPP came back to this protest camp. This is the camp that's been the source of all these cancellations, telling CBC News that, as you said, the situation is dire and they need to actually move to enforce this injunction. And if they did, that may potentially end all of these cancellations, because this has been the source of all of them. The reason that that camp is even there in the first place has to do with the dispute that's happening thousands of kilometers away in BC, the construction of this Coastal Link gas pipeline. Some members of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation are opposed to it. They've set up a protest blockade in northern BC. The RCMP have moved in to arrest some of those protesters, and the people at the camp in Belleville say that they're standing in solidarity with them.
The order states that this motion, made by the plaintiff, Canadian National Railway Company, also known as CN.
Near the rail tracks on Wyman Road in Tyonega Mohawk territory, an enforcement officer reads a court order out loud that calls for this protest camp to be dismantled.
Court orders that any police, service, or peace officer be and hereby is authorized to arrest and remove any person.
It's a standoff that's brought trains to a halt for a 6th straight day.
Thank you very much.
But people here say they're not going anywhere.
We have a heartfelt feeling for those people in Wet'suwet'en territory, because what's being done to them right now was done to us, right here.
The fallout, more than 150 via train cancellations today, making for an unusual quiet inside Toronto's Union Station.
So they keep supporting numbers 1 to 10 for the 2:30 Belleville, Ottawa to the front, please.
At the Greyhound bus station, the opposite scene. It's packed to the brim with passengers from those cancelled trains. Some say it's the waiting and uncertainty that's the hardest part.
My train won't be reimbursed if I get a bus ticket and then say, well, I thought it was going to be canceled, so I have to wait to see if it's canceled. And then, of course, I got stuck at a 7 a.m. bus this morning because all the others were already sold out.
The frustration was palpable, especially from those who need to be somewhere urgently.
I'm trying to get to Ottawa to see my nephew who's just diagnosed with a terminal illness. So I really wanted to see him sooner, but now I'm stuck here waiting until 8 p.m. I'll get to Ottawa, I guess. But it would have been a lot sooner if I had been able to get the train. And yeah, the flights are $500 now, so this is kind of my only option. So yeah, it's really frustrating.
Emotions also ran high at a Toronto rally today. Protesters blocked the intersection of Yonge and Eglinton, calling for the RCMP to pull out of Wet'suwet'en territory.
We're not going to rest until the demands are met.
How long are these rallies and the blockades going to continue for?
Indefinitely. They're not going to stop.
The big question, of course, Dwight, is what's going to happen tomorrow? Will these trains be canceled once again? And a lot of that, of course, hinges on what happens tonight, whether the OPP do, in fact, move in to dismantle this camp. There's also the question, though, if they do, how quickly VIA can mobilize and get its trains back on track for tomorrow. So a lot of what will happen tomorrow hinges on what will take place at that camp in Belleville tonight.
We will be keeping an eye on that. Thank you, Farah. Now, the rail blockade is not just affecting Via Rail. The lines belong to Canadian National, which means freight trains also can't get through. Today, the federal transport minister called the protest dangerous and illegal, but says it's up to individual provinces to enforce injunctions.
It is up to the provinces. They are the ones who have the jurisdiction to act with respect to those injunctions. It is not the federal government. We hope this will get resolved because it's having an important impact on the economy of the country. Not only that, it also potentially presents some safety considerations, some safety concerns.
CN Rail released a statement today about the impact of the rail blockade in Ontario and one in BC. The company says it's currently parking trains across its network, but that it will eventually have no choice but to temporarily discontinue service in key corridors. A demonstration in support of the Indigenous leaders who are fighting the gas pipeline caused a serious disruption at the British Columbia legislature. Demonstrators blocked all the doors to the building, making it difficult for people to get in or out. The action delayed today's speech from the throne and the opening of the spring session of the legislature. Demonstrators have been outside the building now for several days. If you are thinking of sneaking onto a streetcar, watch your back. The TTC wants to crack down on fare evasion. That's after a new report shows clear trends in how people are scamming the system. City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly joins us live now with more on this. So, Lauren, where is it happening most?
Well, we know this is a system-wide problem, and the TTC is losing millions of dollars every year through fare evasion. But there are a certain type of vehicle where this is happening the most often, and that's streetcars. I'm actually on the streetcar route here on College right now, and that's the biggest type of vehicle compared to buses and subways. There's also a large type of fare evasion coming from adults using child Presto cards fraudulently. Tap, pay, and ride. That's what's supposed to happen, but
you see an awful lot of people, again, dressed appropriately, have the ability to pay, and when they don't see people on board, after a while the culture just is they think they don't have to pay.
the latest TTC data shows people are sneaking on close to 6% of the time, with more riders skipping payments on streetcars than both other types of vehicles combined. That's costing the system $70 million in lost revenue every year. The TTC wants to boost the presence of fare inspectors to catch scammers in the act. But this rider advocate says that approach doesn't address the root causes.
Those causes are poverty, people not able to afford the fare. Even the TTC's low income discount is unaffordable to many people in Toronto. The other piece is Presto. You know, there's faulty Presto gates. People aren't always able to load their card.
One of the big challenges when it comes to fare evasion are adults riding for free using a child card, because from a distance, you can't really tell what I'm tapping. Both cards actually look the same, and data shows people are using the child version during school hours or later at night, and at subway stops like York University where there aren't a lot of kids. The new findings also show this type of fraud counts for more than a third of all instances of fare evasion.
One of the things I'm really kind of contemplating is the use of child cards, period. You know, we have so much fraud. Is there something else we can do?
Parents say just ditch the cards entirely.
They would like it to have fun with it, but I don't think they need it.
I think it's fair, especially if you're a young kid like that. As you get older, then you should be paying the fares.
So the TTC will be exploring what to do about this issue, whether that's ditching child cards entirely and letting kids just ride on the system for free, or designing them so they actually look different so someone can tell if someone's fraudulently using one. And that's something Mayor John Tory says that he is lobbying for with Metrolinx, because if you remember, a few years ago, this was actually a pledge that he made for kids to ride for free. Dwight?
Yes, he did, Lauren. Now, these new findings came out around the same time a video surfaced showing a scuffle between TTC staff and a rider. What's the latest on that?
That's right. Well, let's take a look at that video to refresh everyone's memory. As you can see here, this is about a 12-second video. We've slowed it down so you can see what's happening. This scuffle with staff looks like they're tackling a rider. Even so, watching it, it's not entirely clear what's happening there. And the TTC says the incident occurred during a routine fare inspection, but it prompted outcry from people who said this is not the way to handle fare evasion properly. Here's what CEO Rick Leary told me today.
We really have to let the investigation take place, right? Everybody saw the 12 seconds of the video, and you heard me. Safety is the utmost importance to all of us. We don't want to see our customers and our employees. Right? I get to know these people personally. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. Right? So we're going to let this play out with the investigation.
Now, it's not exactly clear when this investigation will be wrapping up, but given all the concern over fare evasion and the fact that this issue is not going away for the TTC, it's something we'll be keeping an eye on. Dwight?
Yep, growing pains for the new system. Thank you, Lauren. Every public elementary school was closed today as the teachers' union held another province-wide one-day strike. Today's province-wide strike is in addition to more rotating walkouts every other day at different school boards. That means more than 900,000 elementary students will be out of school for 2 days this week. The union and province remain deadlocked on contract negotiations, with talks breaking off 2 weeks ago. The province says the key issues are compensation and benefits, but EDFO says it's about funding cuts and special education resources.
It's frustrating because we're already managing with our education as it is, and we're struggling because we do have large classes, and Mr. Ford wants those classes to be larger, so the struggle will be greater and the frustration for the kids will be greater.
What I hope is that at the minimum that we get new understanding from public about the realities of what kids are experiencing in schools and what it looks like there, because I don't think people actually know about what that learning environment looks like.
In a statement sent out today, the Minister of Education maintains that the government has put forward reasonable proposals, including a commitment to maintain full-day kindergarten. Teachers in Ontario's French language system say they will hold weekly province-wide strikes as well, starting Thursday. Now, public high school teachers in some Ontario boards will also strike on Thursday. One of the issues that contract dispute is e-learning. Now, the province wants to bring in 2 mandatory online courses. The union says e-learning is bad for students. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson spoke to a student who's taken an online course to see how it worked for them.
Last semester in my computer programming course.
Living in a small town near Kingston, Ontario, Zane Kalman was initially excited about e-learning. Online courses gave him access to subjects not offered in his small high school, like writer's craft or computer coding. The reality was different.
Workloads, I think, that were really unfair, and teachers that didn't really understand the course material, so they weren't much help when you tried to communicate with them.
I'm getting this email from your teacher.
Zane's mom, Angela, worries what will happen to her 3 younger sons when e-learning becomes compulsory this fall. She says it will mean hours-long access to computers that students might not have.
We do have a computer at home, but it's certainly not dedicated to his use. And internet service is an issue. We have limited bandwidth where we live. It's expensive.
Important links are on the side, the exam.
Toronto teacher Behan Farhadi has studied the effects of e-learning on students for her PhD.
I would say for the average student who really benefits from having a teacher ask them a question about their learning, recognize and getting the data from their answer, and then filling the gaps in their knowledge. Like, that takes a specialist.
While compulsory e-learning experiment has never been done in Canada before, 5 U.S. states have some e-learning requirements with varying results. What makes a difference, says this expert, is whether it's properly funded.
There are good e-learning environments and good e-learning teachers. The key is essentially how we design, deliver, and support the instruction, regardless of the environment.
A spokesperson for Education Minister Stephen Lecce told CBC News, "We are proceeding with developing and implementing a Made in Ontario program that will ensure student flexibility, technological literacy, and a vast selection of courses." What that means for Ontario families like the Kalmans is still unclear. For now, they're walking towards the future of learning that is full of promises and big unknowns. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
All right, Colette, sound the alarm. The cold is coming.
It is coming, and that's why I'm going to start off with this
Dwight, having a look at our extreme monthly lows. Look, so chilly that even the thermometer is shivering. So, yeah, if we look back just over this winter season we've had so far, so just starting this month on the 8th, we dropped to minus 14.9, almost minus 15. In January, our coldest temperature we saw was just under minus 15, nearly minus 16. Back in December, you see where the number went. And in November, I know it's not officially winter, but it's the winter season, so minus 13.9. Where am I going with this? Well, here's where I'm going. We have to drop back to February 1st of last year, more than a year ago, to get to minus 19.1. And essentially, that is my forecast of where we're going as we go Thursday night into Friday morning. So very cold air is going to be moving in. And that's why when you have a day like today, you look at these daytime highs. Tomorrow as well, temperatures above seasonal. Try to kind of soak that in and really enjoy it. We have a few flurries that have been developing around Parry Sound, seeing that some of these might make their way, just scattered, but into the GTA this evening, and then those pushing away. We start the day off quietly on Wednesday. We'll have some sunshine, then clouds build in. Southwestern Ontario will see the snow beginning into the early evening, and for the GTA, it moves in into the later evening, carries on overnight and into Thursday. I'll have much more on the accumulations and that timing. Tonight, minus 5, not minus 2. We're going to 2 degrees tomorrow. Enjoy it.
The warm up before the cold. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
More than a month into the outbreak, the World Health Organization has given a name to the disease caused by the coronavirus. The name shortens the word coronavirus disease 2019 into COVID-19, the 19 referring to 2019, the year the virus first emerged. Now, the head of the WHO says they chose the name to avoid the stigma of associating it with any particular country. Coronavirus has now killed more than 1,000 people in mainland China. The number of those infected around the world, more than 44,000. The majority of them, of course, are in China, where about 60 million people remain under quarantine. The head of the UN Health Agency says the disease poses a graver threat to the world than terrorism. The federal health minister was in Toronto today to meet with provincial and city officials to discuss the response to coronavirus. Patty Haidu says Canada is well poised to identify and treat potential cases.
This is our global contribution to reducing the risk of a pandemic. If Canada can take care of its own country in terms of reducing our rate of infection, in fact, we're supporting the entire globe's population health.
The minister adds Canada has also helped by sending a plane load of supplies worth about $500,000 to China. The Chinese are dealing with a shortage of masks and other essentials. The final group of Canadian evacuees from Wuhan are now at CFB Trenton. Officials say none of the 188 who arrived today have shown any symptoms of the virus. The number of confirmed cases in Canada remains unchanged since last week at 7. Now, when Canada's second and final chartered plane landed in Wuhan yesterday, one man in BC was desperately trying to find out if his wife and daughter would be allowed aboard. He was worried they would be declared ineligible to return to Canada, and Ashley Burke explains why.
Tired but jubilant. I'm very excited.
After weeks of being told no, Monty Gisborne's celebrating a yes.
The last thing I heard from my wife and daughter was just a picture of them sitting in an airplane. And you could see the window beside them, and I'm going, yes, okay. Because until they sat on that seat, there was no guarantees from anybody that they were coming home.
No guarantees because his wife and daughter are permanent residents of Canada. China had said only Canadian citizens or those traveling with a Canadian child could leave the lockdown area on chartered planes.
I initially had almost no contact with the government, and then over the weekend, things changed, and people reached out.
Oh, yeah! How exactly it all happened isn't clear, but Daniela and Dominica made it to Ontario.
I am good. I'm so happy.
So happy, Dominica's been singing as a thank you to everyone who helped her, from flight crew to Red Cross workers at CFB Trenton.
First meal here.
They'll spend the next 2 weeks under quarantine with hundreds of other evacuees. Canada says it's out of an abundance of caution.
We decided to take this prudent approach so that we could actually ensure that those people coming from where the epicenter of the illness is are monitored carefully for symptoms.
She wanted to stay here 1 month, just 14 days.
Gisborne's now counting down the days until his family is home with him.
Hello, how are you?
Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
At 1,000 kilometers north of the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, Beijing is not under as tight a lockdown as Wuhan, but with about 340 cases of infection, it's considered one of China's most at-risk cities, and for weeks, most residents have stayed at home. The normally bustling capital has become a massive ghost town. Sasha Petrusik takes us there.
Ride onto the streets of Beijing these days and feel the echoes of an epidemic. Its eerie emptiness.
In the middle of a regular day here in the center of Beijing, these streets would be jammed with cars. But ever since this virus arrived, well, see for yourself.
Beijing's avenues this desolate for weeks. Its old backstreet hutongs barren. Empty subways, empty malls, empty airport, closed schools. More than 20 million live here in one of the world's megacities. But life is on hold behind the barricades of every housing complex. It's getting a little uncomfortable being stuck here, says Zhang Jinggang, who spends his time learning how to cook, dumplings mostly. But it's safer to stay at home, he says. Too much coronavirus. Those who don't hide away face checkpoints and temperature screenings. Officials looking for the telltale signs of disease, high fever. Neighbors have also been known to report each other if they suspect infection. And then, as in many videos uploaded to the internet, teams of suited police come to enforce quarantine. Is that the best solution?
We don't have anything else to offer at present.
Ian Lipkin is an American epidemiologist who's advising the Chinese government on how to stop coronavirus.
I would say the only thing you have is isolation. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be voluntary. It's difficult.
Out in the streets of Beijing, there are those who don't accept that. Zhao Saijin plays outside with his daughter. This virus can't be prevented, he says. If we're going to get it, we'll get it. We can't have the whole country locked inside. And yet, 3 weeks since the crisis started, much of it still is. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Beijing.
Still ahead, what do the headquarters of the RCMP in Ottawa, the Passport Canada office in North York, and the Canada Revenue Agency building on Front Street all have in common? Bed bugs. Our investigation into how the government is tackling the insect invasion coming up. But first,
we have worked really hard. Our volunteers have done an extraordinary job. And, I hope very much that we're going to win here.
Will the Granite State help solidify a leader in the race to become the Democratic presidential nominee? We'll take you to New Hampshire after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
It's take two tonight for the Democratic Party. We still don't know who really won the Iowa primary from over a week ago, but there's confidence a winner will emerge in New Hampshire. You are looking live at Bedford High School in Bedford, New Hampshire. Voting continues this hour in today's primary, but already one of the biggest names in the race is openly bracing for disappointment. Katie Simpson has more from on the ground in the Granite State.
Morning, sir. How are you feeling today?
Real good.
That good feeling didn't last long. Joe Biden left his hotel, canceling his plans to host a New Hampshire results party tonight. It's a strong sign he's not looking forward to those results.
We're still mildly hopeful here in New Hampshire, and we'll see what happens.
Tens of thousands of voters are expected to cast ballots in this state's primary, the second contest in the long journey to become a presidential nominee. Senator Bernie Sanders has consistently led Democrats in the polls here, drawing 7,500 people to a concert rally last night. Nope, you're good. Former Mayor Pete Buttigieg appears to be running in a safe second place, which means there's a fight for third to remain relevant.
They just seem to squabble among themselves, and I don't see a real clear winner.
Some Democrats are anxious to see this process wrap up so they can focus on what they see as a bigger fight, taking on President Donald Trump.
There's too many of them to choose from, and they should really all get together.
Joe Biden left New Hampshire to try to change the narrative of this race. He's not expected to do very well here, so he's heading to South Carolina, a more diverse state where he does have a lot of support. That primary is held at the end of the month, and Biden's team is doing everything it can to ensure he has a strong performance there. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Sea-High Chinese food has been around for almost 70 years, but they're closing by the end of the month.
They said don't close. One gentleman said you fly up here to eat before you close.
The community is going to be sad to see them go, but they're giving back to the community by auctioning off some of their retro decor, like their iconic neon sign. But they're not about to give away their secret plum sauce recipe, though. I'm Ali Chiasson. I'll have that story coming up.
The feds have a pest problem. According to a CBC News investigation, about 31 federal offices in Ontario have bed bugs. Although most of the infestations are in Ottawa, the critters have also been found in buildings in Toronto, Hamilton, and Waterloo. The federal government is looking for pest control companies to deal with the issue, but the union representing federal workers say it needs to do more.
First and foremost, let's nip it in the bud, get sniffer dogs to proactively inspect every federal government building, coast to coast to coast, and then should workers who work in a building that has been found to have bed bugs, should they find bed bugs in their home, the federal government should cover those fumigation expenses.
Bed bugs often travel by stowing away in luggage, purses, or on clothing. That being said, officials say they still don't know how the pests ended up in so many federal buildings. A federal office complex in Gatineau, Quebec is getting its air tested. For years, workers have been complaining of mysterious illnesses. They say the place is infested with cockroaches and even bats. But as Amanda Pfeffer tells us, there may be bigger issues plaguing their workplace.
I have seen Japanese cockroaches.
Sophie Lavoie has not been working long at the federal complex, but long enough to know her cockroaches.
I took a picture, and with the app I was able to identify the bug that was walking on the desk.
The federal government commissioned air quality tests. All but 20 of the 260 workers surveyed reported some symptom. 1 in 10 reported being treated for a respiratory illness. 1 in 20 reported an immune system-related illness. Last fall, one of their unions circulated a petition to tell government the situation is urgent. The union released this video, a bat flying above the heads of workers. Bats and their droppings have been a problem for years. Dr. Jennifer Armstrong has treated some of the workers at the Terrasse de la Chaudière, and she says the biggest culprit is likely not the bats.
I would say all of the symptoms you just mentioned could come from mold.
Dr. Armstrong says the clue is in the survey itself, where a third of workers say they have seen visible signs of water damage. But mold is not being tested until next summer. And some worry that bureaucracy may be getting in the way of a more rapid response.
The problem is that it takes so much thinking, it takes so much funds, it takes so much efforts that it's easier to fix what is in front of us, what is the most pressing, and let the bigger picture be put aside.
The big picture, daunting for this worker on her very first day.
Well, I mean, it's not something you want to read when you're starting in a new ministry. Hey, by the way, there's bats that may fly over your head. Welcome to the office, I guess.
The parliamentary secretary for the minister responsible is telling workers that this ongoing testing is supposed to help identify the problems so that they can fix them as quickly as possible. Amanda Pfeffer, CBC News, Ottawa.
A new coalition of farmers say they need a bigger role in the fight against climate change. The group launched today, marking National Agriculture Day. They want to fight the perception that farmers are harming the environment. And as Nick Waveri reports, they have big plans to help reduce harmful emissions.
One thing we like to say is there's never any bare soil in nature.
Underneath the blanket of snow on Brent Preston's farm, a medley of crops is surprisingly green and alive.
We've got peas, clover, sunflowers, oats. We mix them all together.
The technique is known as cover cropping, which keeps the soil active and soaking up carbon even in the winter. It's just one of the ways he's taking on climate change.
So these trees are all new since you started here?
Yes, so we planted these trees about 15 years ago. They're white cedar, which is a native species.
Cover crops and natural windbreaks are a big part of the operation at this organic vegetable farm in Creemore. Canada's larger agricultural industry isn't quite so green. The national coalition they've joined wants to change that with better policy and the adoption of more environmental practices on farms.
I think especially when it comes to climate change, people feel like farmers are part of the problem.
Canadian agriculture accounts for more than 10% of national emissions. But unlike industries such as oil and gas, experts say farming could be a sleeping giant in the fight against climate change.
Agriculture is
a huge contributor to carbon emission, but it also offers a huge opportunity to reduce carbon emissions and also capture carbon.
And with Canadian farmers facing more droughts and unpredictable weather, the new coalition is facing an urgent and massive task.
The biggest challenge is really that there is not one recipe. There's no silver bullet to cure it all.
But farmers say it's worth taking that on, even though big chemical companies and industrial farms may not be so excited.
Yes, we are going to face pushback. There is a huge business model built around the agricultural system as the way it is today, and it's very profitable for folks.
The coalition wants to start working on new agricultural policies now, but they say government incentives and funding will probably be needed. Nick Boisvert, CBC News, Creemore.
Like they say in the musical Les Mis, call it one day more. That's it.
You've got it right. We have one more mild day, and then things are going to change. There's a snowstorm coming through, and then much colder air, colder than we have seen, in fact, for more than a year in terms of where those temperatures are falling to. So there it is. And for Wednesday night and Thursday, the snow, and then the end of the week drop. So these are the temperatures, the current readings out there, and still in most cases, a few exceptions I know where we've got some light snow around Mount Forest, towards Barrie -2, below freezing. Everywhere else at freezing or still above, still hanging on at this hour as we're approaching 7 o'clock. So the radar showing you some of these squalls because of the winds coming across the relatively warmer waters of the lakes. And a few of these flurries may make their way into the GTA over the next couple of hours. I wouldn't expect there to be much, though, so it's not anything of a real concern there. In fact, high pressure's kind of building in here, and as it does, it means we start the day off quite pleasantly on Wednesday. Now, the winds will pick up eventually again, but we'll have some sunshine kind of mixing with cloud cover, and then we're going to see our two players coming together. So that cold Arctic air to the north and this moisture coming in from the south. So Wednesday morning is fine. By Wednesday, late afternoon, early evening, the snow begins in southwestern Ontario, and then it begins late evening to push towards the GTA, and that moves through, carries on overnight Wednesday through Thursday, although by Thursday afternoon it'll be lighter in nature, but the winds picking up and eventually some squalls will set up, and our temperatures beginning to fall as that Arctic air will be making its way in. So it will clear our skies back out again, but we are talking about those temperatures falling off significantly. In terms of the snow we may see, look at how close this is, between 5 centimeters in Toronto and over 10 just over for Hamilton. So we'll be right in that line of 5 to 10 centimeters. Same thing back towards southwestern Ontario, a little less to the north. The temperatures tonight, lows of -4 to -6, feeling closer to -11, though with the winds. One more day, mild air with those temperatures above seasonal, so highs around 1 to 2 degrees. It's Thursday night into Friday, so think Friday morning, almost -20. And then as we go towards Friday, even the high is -10, and Friday night into Saturday, -17. It's going to warm back up after that, though, Dwight. It's pretty short-lived.
That's the way the roller coaster works, call it up and down, as you always say. Thank you.
Yep, buckle up.
If you've ever eaten at Sea High Chinese food restaurant, if you live in Toronto, you've probably passed by it at some point near Bathurst in the 401. Now, after more than half a century, the restaurant is closing. But before that happens, the owners are holding an auction to help a local hospital. Alicia San has the details.
Look at all these old photographs.
Yeah.
It's amazing. This area looked a lot different back then.
Oh, yes. I couldn't believe it. At that time, it's farmland.
Sea High opened in 1951 during what's known as the
golden era of the big 4 or 5 restaurants in Chinatown.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be all in the Dundas and Elizabeth area,
Mm-hmm.
behind City Hall.
Mm-hmm.
They're all gone.
Yes.
And Sea High moved up here.
Sea High's neon sign has been buzzing here at Bathurst and the 401 ever since.
You had loyal customers going to your Chinatown location in the 50s sort of follow you up here.
Yeah, right, that's right.
The menu hasn't changed much, but the food prices sure have.
It's Sea High's menu, you know.
Oh, wow. A whole dish for 75 cents.
Yeah.
Dinner for 4, $5.75.
Yeah, right.
How times change, huh?
Yeah, right.
I grew up here. I did my homework behind the counter.
in my uniform when I was going to school in the area, and I also worked in the takeout counter.
I help pack the orders. I cooked a little bit sometimes. I've had many burns and accidents here.
After 3 generations in the Chu family, Sihai is closing, partly because the landlord is shortening the leases in the building and partly because it's time for them to enter the next phase of their life.
Most of my customers now, they old. And Baycrest is the place where most of them they live.
Before they close at the end of the month, they'll be auctioning off some of their retro decor, including their vintage neon sign, giving the proceeds to Baycrest Geriatric Center.
They've been the whole life as our customer. So I want to do something that pay to the hospital.
We have a lot of customers and clientele that want to buy the sign or have it as memorabilia of some kind. We're still trying to figure out the logistics of that.
Different from a packet.
The family's secret homemade plum sauce recipe, in case you were wondering, is not for sale.
I think the legacy is just how we were ingrained into part of the community. The people were treated as family here.
It's like a second home to many people in the neighborhood. So definitely we want to thank everyone for supporting us for all these years.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, I speak with the president and founder of the Toronto Black Film Festival.
Having a Black Film Festival here is impactful and meaningful. Unfortunately, we still don't have that diversity reflected on cinema and TV, even in Toronto. And it's a problem.
What the event means to the city and how she feels about soon sharing a stage with Spike Lee. One of Hollywood's biggest and most outspoken directors will be in town later this week. Spike Lee will receive a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Toronto Black Film Festival. The honor will be given to him by his friend Fabienne Collat. She's a Haitian-Canadian filmmaker who created and now manages 9 festivals worldwide, including the one in Toronto, which starts tomorrow. We met today at the festival's venue, Carlton Cinemas. I spoke to you when you were just starting this thing. I think it was about 8 years ago. You were just trying to bring this festival here, and you had this passion and this energy, and you're like, it's gonna work. No, I'm gonna do this. 8 years later, you're still going strong. How are you pulling this off, and why is it so important that you continue to push and do this?
It is very important. This festival is essential. It's necessary. We are in the city where you have the most the largest black population. Having a black film festival here is impactful and meaningful. Unfortunately, we still don't have that diversity reflected on cinema and TV, even in Toronto. And it's a problem because cinema and TV should be a mirror of our demographic reality. So that's why it's even more relevant, because all these talents, all these actors and then filmmakers, they wouldn't have had a voice and a platform otherwise than for this festival.
We just went through the Oscars, and once again, Oscars so white. It's trending.
Again.
People are talking about it. This is something that Spike Lee has been fighting against for a very long time in his career. Is that why you're bringing Spike to Toronto? Is it not only to pay tribute to him and this incredible career he's had, but he's one of the proponents of this, saying, hey, we've got to get some diversity in some of these major film studios and these films they're putting out?
Yes, Spike Lee has a message that will definitely resonate with people here in Toronto, not just filmmakers and people in the industry, but also the audience. We all have our part to do, not just the film industry, but we need to hold this film industry accountable. And the audience, if it's starting from the bottom up,
yeah, get out there and support these films.
Exactly, that is great. And then we need to demand more of them. And then there was a saying before that was saying, oh, black films don't sell and everything else, until we get, oh my God, we get the Spike Lee films. Oh, we get the Black Panther of this world. We get this and that. So we know that it's a myth, that film with diversity actually sell. People want to see other things. They want to travel. They want to see the world differently. So that's what Spike Lee is about too, to empower the next generation of filmmakers and black filmmakers, and then to spread that message on how can we do it together.
Talk about empowering filmmakers. Another highlight this year, showcasing documentaries made by young black filmmakers, including 6 from right here.
We did that because we believe we need more people that are professionally trained, that have their films done in a professional setting, and that the film industry needs some new blood and some diversity, and we need the future Spike Lees right now. And remember, one day Spike has a short film too.
I remember.
You know what I mean?
Started out,
so this is how it started, and short film really are the way to really becoming.
To get into the industry and try to get your break.
Absolutely.
When are we going to see more diversity in film? And when are you going to see more of that diversity represented on the Oscar stage and when they are handing out these statuettes?
We, the film industry, has a lot of work to do in making sure that around the table, when we're picking these films, when the producers are saying, okay, we're going to finance this, we're going to pick this film, we're going to do this, that we have enough people of color in power position that can say, hey, we're selecting this too. We're going to do these films too, because they are selecting the film for the next year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. And if we don't have diversity there, we will not have diversity at the Oscars. And same goes for the Canadian Screen Awards, and same goes for everywhere. They have a responsibility to include, but we have a responsibility to provide these films that are inclusive. And for people that care, it starts locally. Come and support your own. Come and support our filmmakers at a Toronto Black Film Festival like this. Don't wait until they go to the Oscars. Don't wait until they are like, oh, come support them here, because that's now. It matters now that they're starting. And on our website, everything is there. So I urge everybody to come and support Spike Lee and then see Spike Lee, because that's going to be one in a lifetime experience here in Toronto too.
Appreciate your time and the festival.
Yes.
And I know that the film and video industry in this country really appreciates the hard work you're doing.
Thank you for the support. Thank you.
Queen Elizabeth's eldest grandson and his Canadian wife are getting a divorce. More from London, England, next. The rough run for the royal family is continuing. There is news today of another divorce. This time it's one of the Queen's grandsons. As Aaron Collins explains, it's another controversy with a Canadian connection.
Splashed across London's tabloids, news that another royal couple won't be living happily ever after. This time it's the Queen's eldest grandson and his Canadian wife who've split. Peter Phillips, the son of Princess Anne, married Autumn Kelly in 2008. The two met in Kelly's hometown of Montreal, but there were early signs that adjusting to a royal life wasn't easy, apparent in this CBC interview from 2016.
It's taken some time. It wasn't seamless at first, but I've had some people in the family who have guided me and helped me through it, told me what to wear and when to wear it.
But the Phillips life isn't entirely regal. As non-working royals, they pay their own way.
我是 Peter Phillips.
A fact that had Peter hawking milk on Chinese TV.
This is what I drink.
The couple has confirmed the split, asking for privacy for themselves and their two daughters.
For the Queen, this is about more than the divorce of her grandson, 15th in line for the throne. It also adds to the growing sense that the royal family is fraying at the edges.
This is, after all, just the latest news to take some of the sheen off the royals. In January, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle decided they wanted out, choosing to step away from their royal duties and live part-time in Canada. Prince Andrew has also stepped away from public life, sullied by his friendship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now this, and royal watchers say none of it helps the royal brand.
It's forcing the institution to look at itself, to reassess its future. What is the monarchy now going to look like now that we're 3 senior royals down?
Those senior royals were out in public today, an attempt to show solidarity during tough times, or perhaps, after another tough day, a need to show they're still standing. Aaron Collins, CBC News, London.
Bundle up, Toronto. It might have been warm today, but the temperature is about to plummet. Call it's back after the break.
Here's Kyle now. Up top, OG! Oh my!
And with a few plays just like that, our Raptors made history last night against the Timberwolves, winning their 15th straight game in a row. Last night's win set a new Canadian pro sports winning streak record, moving past the Calgary Stampeders. They are heading to New York next to face off against those Brooklyn Nets, and we know how Masai feels about Brooklyn, so we're going to be good. We're going to beat them.
Yes, remind me.
Yeah, no, I can't repeat what he said, though. A few seconds left, the cold is coming.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, though, we get to 15, and now we're like, oh, we want 20, we want whatever.
Yes,
you know?
we do.
They got 15. In terms of what we're seeing, our temperature is still above seasonal tonight, and we'll see that tomorrow as well. So -5, feeling like -11, 2 degrees tomorrow night into Thursday, though, snow on the way, and then cold air.
Snow, too, and cold. Oh,
you get it all.
That's it for us. That's it for us today. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6.